On today's episode, we have Eddie Randle, reporter and anchor of 9 News Colorado, here to talk about his struggles with addiction, alcoholism, his journey into and through recovery, and how he got sober. I'm Adam Vibe Gunton, and this is the Recovered on Purpose show. The black represents the darkness from which we came. The white represents the light in which we now live. And the red represents the passion it takes to live Recovered on Purpose. All right, guys, today's episode is brought to you by Recovered on Purpose. Recovered on Purpose was founded with the mission of raising up an army of recovered addicts to tell their stories in powerful and impactful ways that will free others suffering from the bondage of addiction, as well as tell our stories in the school system to deter the future generations going on the path of addiction. Guys, we are starting to do more and more interviews of other addicts and alcoholics in recovery on this page. If this is you and you want to get your story out, go to recoveredonpurpose.com/contact and tell me about yourself. And guys, a quick disclaimer, Eddie and my heads are 6 feet apart and we are both negatively tested for COVID within the last week. And that's why we're able to do this in-person interview. We wanted to do a new kind of episode for you where I actually have an in-person guest, as well as this is kind of his thing. He gets to sit at a desk and do news anchoring. So let's get right into this. Eddie, I know you've done a lot of reporting, you've done a lot of things in that part of your life, but for some time before the past few years, you had this secret. So tell us a little bit about your life before recovery.
Before recovery, it was just a lot of, it was drinking. And it started off with drinking when I was in high school more. And then, drugs kind of like creeped in there, kind of a party scene in high school, party scene in college, and then, the after college life. But alcohol was always, I would say, my main struggle, or I guess my primary struggle. And it's something that I didn't even realize was a problem until, I would say in the last 10 years, which sounds like a big, gap, like the last 10 years before, I guess 8 years ago before I got sober. I would say it was an issue that I knew, but it wasn't something that I knew that I had to address. I just felt like it was, people said I drank too much. I could probably agree that I drank too much, but it wasn't something that was going to stop the flow of my life or the progression of my success, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember before the episode, we were actually talking a little bit about those friends that were saying something to you. So what was it that you were telling about these friends that were saying something to you about your drinking problem?
Well, it was always said to me as a joke. That was the main thing. It was just like, oh gosh, you drink too much, ha ha ha. Or, it's like when you hear, oh, I can't wait till Eddie comes to the party because we know he's either gonna have already pre-gamed and be drunk or he's gonna get really drunk. He's the life of the party. So you hear these negative comments followed by this kind of what some people may think of as positive. I thought it was, I'm the life of the party. I'm the fun person. So it's okay that I get drunk. People expect it. And that's, after a while, when you hear it so much and you're like, this is what people expect out of you, you just kind of adapt to it. And I felt like this was Eddie. Like being drunk was a part of who I was. And so it's okay. Like, it's okay. Like I'm okay when I'm doing my job, I'm pretty much sober then. But afterwards, when it's, time to go out and have fun and have drinks, it's okay to be drunk because that's what everybody wants to see. That is the lie that I told myself.
Right. So if you were able to say something to someone that maybe notices a friend that is going down that path, that sees that someone is struggling, that sees that someone does have a problem, how do you think that they should approach that person? How would have you liked somebody to approach you so that maybe this would have been cut back with a lot of time?
Maybe not approach it or approach it without a laughing track. This isn't a TV show. You're talking to somebody. This is, but this, someone's life is not a sitcom. And so you can't really address it that way. And that's how it was addressed to me. I do now, years later, and after working with a therapist, I can kind of like go back and see that person really was trying to reach out to me, but trying to do it in a way where they felt more comfortable. Let's laugh about it. But my advice would be, tell someone the way they need to hear it, the way you feel it. Does it bother you? Is it a problem for you? I remember hearing from one of my close friends, one of the people who went and actually, talked to me about my problem. I remember hearing from her, when I go out with you, it's no longer fun because I become your babysitter. I become, you know, the mom figure. I become the person that has to make sure that Eddie is okay and can get home, you know, safely. And there was, you know, towards the end, before I went into recovery, there was one instance where I was asked to leave a bar and she was asked to leave too because she was with me, not because she was drunk, but because we walked in together and they were like, you've got to get him out of here.
Wow. Wow. So what happened at that time, like with that relationship? Because I know obviously like if she felt that way, what was going on? Was there a strain? Was there more going on with the communication that was going on there?
So I had two friends, her and another friend of mine, both who I work with, and they were really good friends. And later on, I found out that this was a conversation that they wanted to have early. Yeah. Like we actually, like I can remember the day we actually took our dogs out and we were walking our dogs in Cheeseman Park, and they wanted to have the conversation with me then. And for some reason, they were nervous and felt like this isn't the time. And so I believe probably a couple of months had went by and we were at a going away party for one of my friends who worked with us and had got a new job. And so it was her last day. We went to a going away party and, you know, I pre-gamed and was, you know, already kind of intoxicated. I'm very good at hiding it, so you couldn't tell that I was drunk probably when she picked me up, but well into about 2 hours into it, I was, you know, to the point where the bartender had already served me and then saw me and realized my job can be in jeopardy. I can't serve him anymore, and went and told her that I needed to leave. And so it was that next day that they took me out, both of them, two of my friends who were there. And honestly, I tell this story and I thought we were going out for drinks. Typical alcoholic, right? I'm like, oh, we're going out for drinks, good. And they were like, no, we're gonna go to a coffee shop. And I'm like, okay, we're gonna do this and then we're gonna go have some fun later. Right. But no, they took me out to a coffee shop in downtown Denver and we sat down and we talked. And basically, I remember one of the phrases being, what's wrong? There's a black cloud over you. The Eddie that we knew a year ago, 2 years ago, is no longer here. And we really want to help you get some help.
Wow. And guys, ladies, if you're watching this, I just want to thank you for stepping up and having that conversation, because there's a lot of us struggling that don't have that friend. And guys, if you have a friend out there that's struggling, that just needs to hear it, don't hold back. You're hearing it from Eddie right now. Don't hold back, because we need to hear that. Our perceptions while we're in our sickness, right? Our perception of life, our perception of like someone coming up to us and saying something to us, we're perceiving it as a joke because we're not able to see the seriousness of the situation sometimes that we're in. And I know we fast forwarded to your life in Denver, but we were talking a little bit about something that actually happened in Oklahoma when you were reporting out there. I really want to tell them that story because after that, you're still struggling with this addiction, with this alcoholism. So tell them what happened in Oklahoma that kind of showed that you're having a problem.
Yeah, it's a crazy story, and it's crazy because it's one of those things where I always talk about it and I say that was a rock bottom moment, but sometimes someone's rock bottom isn't the bottom that really pushes them to where they need to go. Right. And in that case, that was my rock bottom. So, you know, I was partying all the time in Tulsa. It was one of the first times that I had moved away from home, because first I worked at a television station in Wichita Falls, where I'm from. Stayed there like 4.5 years, like kind of like got my feel of the job. Then I was, you know, promoted and kind of moved. I took a promotion to move to Tulsa, and I was away from home, and I was living on my own for, you know, the first time in a while after college. And so I'm partying all the time. And that's like most of the people that I worked with were, you know, had just gotten out of college, had only been out for a few years. So that's what we do. We're all the way from home, we party. And it had just gotten pretty bad. And I remember one day going to a party at a high-rise apartment that my friend had, and drank way too much, like drank throughout the day, into the night. And then I think it had to be a Sunday. And so I'm drinking, I pass out, I go to sleep, and I feel like, okay, I'm gonna like sleep for a few hours. I wake up at 6 o'clock the next morning, and I'm like, oh gosh, you know, I have to work later on today in the afternoon. Plus my dog was at home all day by herself, hadn't been let out. So I was like, let me get home. So I feel like I'm good enough. I've just slept for about 6 hours. I get up, I leave my friend's apartment, I get into my car, my aunt's car, because my car broke down and I was actually like using one of her cars. And I start driving home. And it happened to be the day that the city was closing down Riverside Drive. That's where I lived. And it happened to be the day they were closing it down because they were building this big $350 million, I believe, park called a Gathering Place. So, television news reporter in this car driving home. This is a big story. So many different news outlets are covering this story. As I'm driving down Riverside, I crash my car into a tree. And it happens while people are reporting on it, while people are live for their morning shows. And so I remember the station I was working at, the person that I worked with had, mentioned, oh gosh, we just heard this crash. We're going to talk to you guys later about it. I remember officers and ambulance, first responders pulling me out of the car. And I remember hearing, I think we're pulling out a dead body. The airbags had deployed from both sides. I was in this boat of a car, a Lincoln Town car. And I think that was the only thing, the size of the car that saved my life, of course, and God. Yeah. But that's exactly what that was because, what are the odds of me being in this business and doing that in front of other people who are in this business? And long story short, prayers and prayers. And of course, I was blessed enough that, the other stations didn't cover it. My station didn't cover it. And it was great. It's not that big of a news story to cover, but I mean, the sensationalism behind it, is like, oh my gosh, news reporter does this, and it was, it would be a good way for another outlet to be like, look at your person. A lot of people tell me that it was a credit to who I am, my personality, and how I am with other people. And that's why it didn't happen. I also believe it has a lot to do with my faith, because I don't think I've ever prayed more in my life than I prayed during that whole, couple of weeks into a couple of months that I dealt with that.
Right. And I love that story because that's literally another instance of the proof that God is with us the entire time. Yeah. Like that, I've had experiences like that also, like through addiction, God like literally pointing at our life and saying, hey, I'm here. Let's get you out of this. Let's get you out of this. Because like you said, what are the odds that you, a news reporter, is caught live on multiple news stations with this low point of your life, right? And then also, the thing that this also shows for people struggling with addiction and with alcoholism is this wasn't the low point. This wasn't the end of your alcoholism or addiction. So can you go into a little bit how you felt about it and why it was that thing didn't cause you to stop drinking?
I think I just wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to admit that I had a problem. As surprising as it is, you crash, your aunt's car into this tree, and you hear the words, I think I'm pulling out a dead body. You get through that, and I'll be honest, I was drinking later on that day. I was. I wasn't partying, but I was dealing with, what did I just do? Is my career over? I could have hurt someone. Thank God that I didn't. I could have killed myself. Right. There's so many things that were going through my mind, and all I can think of was, okay, the only way for me not to deal with this is to drink. But at the same time, I'm like, this is what got me in this situation. But how do I, get past this? And I didn't have the tools or the right people to talk to. I didn't know how to bring it up. So my solution to every single thing, my solution to a good day, a bad day, an easy day was to drink. Yeah. That was one of the worst days of my life, and that was my solution. Wow.
So guys, you've heard some of his story of the darker times. Right after the break, we're going to talk about what got him into the journey of recovery and one of the top stories that he has actually reported on right after the break. See you guys in a minute. All right, guys, today's episode is brought to you by Recovered on Purpose. Recovered on Purpose was founded with the mission of raising up an army of recovered addicts to tell their stories in powerful and impactful ways. That means you. We need you in this mission to be sharing your story. And guys, if you want to be part of the Recovered on Purpose show, go ahead and share this out, comment, like this, get it out to your groups, get it out to your pages so we can get this message out. Also, if you want to share your story on this show or on this platform, go to recoveredonpurpose.com/contact and contact me, telling me a little bit about yourself so we can kind of figure out how we're going to get your story out. And also, if you go to recoveredonpurpose.com and subscribe at the bottom, I give you a free audio and digital copy of my book, From Chains to Saved, One Man's Journey Through the Spiritual Realm of Addiction. We will see you in just a second. All right, everyone, welcome back. So before we go into the recovery journey, I do want Eddie to go over a little bit about the biggest story that I know that he's covered, that a lot of you have seen on Netflix and just heard this story. Because we actually, when we went out to dinner a few months ago, I know you were telling me about the impact that it had on you, and this was just a few months before you got sober. So I know you know what I'm talking about. So go ahead and tell them what you were reporting on.
Yeah. I've covered a lot of different stories throughout my career, but the one that sticks with me freshest because I've been in Denver for the last 4 years, but honestly, it's probably the most horrific story that I've ever covered, and that was Chris Watts, the father who murdered his wife, who was pregnant, and his 2 little girls. I remember, I can't remember specifically if it was the morning of. I think it was the morning of that I got called out to it with my photographer. But the thing is that afterwards, you start hearing all the details of the case, and we were out there day after day after day, and it weighs on you. And I remember, my station asking us, do you guys need anyone to talk to? And there was a lot of mental health services that were provided to us if we needed the help. And then, you got to get into if someone is willing to take that help. And at the time, I was still towards the end of my addiction, which was the time that I was drinking the most. Yeah. And that definitely did weigh a lot on me and everything that I did, because, of course, you're covering the worst story that you could have possibly ever covered in your career, at least in my career. And the only way to forget about it for me was to escape through drugs, through alcohol, because it's not like, let me forget about this and hope that I don't have to deal with it. It's let me forget about this right now because I know I have to revisit it tomorrow. I'm going again tomorrow. We're getting back up and we're driving back out there tomorrow and next week. And then when that, dies down a little bit, you still have to go back whenever, you have a new court proceeding or whenever, the trial and all that starts. And that didn't happen in this case, but I mean, it was several weeks of, having to cover this story. And then when I wasn't covering it, it was still, my colleagues covering it. So everyone's talking about it. And then of course, when all your friends know that you're a reporter and you hear about this story, everyone wants to know, what are your thoughts on that? What do you think? And it's just how can I escape this? I can't escape it. As soon as I'm outside talking to someone who's not at work, that person is also bringing it up. So let me just sit in my house and drink.
Wow. So what was it that, and thank you for sharing that. What was it that happened, whether it be emotionally or mentally or in reality, in your life, what was it that happened that made you decide that I need to do whatever it takes to get sober?
Yeah. It was a little of what I shared earlier. Working in this business, in the business that I work in television news, you have to be able to pick up and move. You move a lot. That's how your next job sometimes is moving to another city, a bigger city. And that's what I did. I started off in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and then, I went to my hometown of Wichita Falls, Texas, and then I went to Tulsa, and then I came to Denver, which this is the biggest city I've ever worked in. And it's I've made it to the big time. I'm so excited. I'm working around some of the journalists that I have followed for years. And so you get this relationship because you move so much. Your friends that you make at these stations become your family. And so when I went out that night for my friend who was leaving for her going away party, and then the next day I had two of my close friends sit me down and ask me what's going on and make the comments about the dark cloud and, just asking what can we do to help. I realized at that point they were friends, but this is also my family. I felt like these were two sisters talking to me. Like, I have two sisters of my own, but I felt like these were my two sisters, in news, in this business, and where I'm living here in Denver, telling me, Eddie, you need some help. And that's when it clicked. It was like, okay, I don't know exactly how I'm gonna do this, but you have to do something. And I went through, a list of things. What am I gonna do? Am I gonna get into a 12-step program? Am I gonna go to a rehab facility? Like, there were so many things. And luckily for me, I was already working with a therapist who suggested, getting into a 12-step program and was like, I think you can try this. And she didn't make the decision for me, but she helped me. And I did. Like, I think 2 days later, after that conversation with my two friends, I did go to my first 12-step meeting, and that's been a part of my life ever since. And I can't say that things have been perfect. Things haven't, the grass is not completely greener on the other side, or it's not the greenest, but it is greener. Right. Like, my life is so much better than it was 2 years and 3 months ago.
Right. So I want to touch on two things. Again, I do want to say thank you to the interventionists, and that's, if you're someone that has intervened in someone's life, this goes to show that this literally could have saved your life. This intervention could have saved your life. So I want to thank you for that. And number two, was it your first time going to this program? Have you drank since?
No.
Wow. So that goes to show that, because I was going to the program and meetings and stuff for almost a decade before I was actually able to get it to click. So what was it that you did specifically that you think worked for you when you went to the program?
I think I just opened my mind and I trusted it. Alcohol was an issue for me, but before alcohol was an issue for me, weight was an issue for me. I had gastric bypass at the age of 23. I used to be 430 pounds. So, when repetition clicks. It clicks and it's like, okay, for me, when I commit to something, I'm going to commit to it. I'm not saying that meaning that there's no way that I'll ever relapse. I am a man, I'm a human, I am weak. But there is something about the way I've always operated is that when I say I'm going to do something, I try my damnedest to stick to it. And I think that being a part of my life really helps out in recovery, as well as just having so many people around me. I met you in recovery. I met a lot of people who have remained my friends since, the day I started going to a 12-step program. And we were talking about this right before. I think it was knowing that it's okay. That now that I'm here, I'm admitting that I have a problem and I'm addressing it. And I think seeing that there are so many people also in recovery who are doctors, who are lawyers, who are professionals. I had that stigma too, where I'm like, oh, I can't be an alcoholic. I don't need to go to recovery. I'm not homeless. Right. I'm not this. I don't have bad clothes. I showered today. It's all these things that aren't true that run through your mind that kept me from moving into recovery early on. But once I did step into those doors and I walked in those rooms and I saw there are people just like me. Everyone is just like me. It's okay. Yeah. They're admitting they have a problem, and I can admit that I have mine too, and I can work towards getting better.
Yeah, and like we were talking before, guys, this is someone that was struggling, that was on TV basically every day, and nobody would have known this, and it goes to show that and a lot of this stigma is being broken in today's society, which I love. Is that an addict or an alcoholic is not the person that you see under the bridge, is not the homeless person on the side of the road. It's you, it's me, it's you. And it's gotta be opened up about, because more people have to be able to have that conversation that your two friends had with you. We have to be open about, this is something that a lot of people from all different walks of life struggle with. And there is a solution. We are recovering. Like for a long time, I didn't think I was actually gonna be able to do it. I honestly, I got to a point where I thought I was gonna die. I didn't think that I was gonna be able to do it. But then as soon as I made the decision to do the work, that's what I was kind of alluding to with you. And it seems like you had the same thing where I made a decision, and then I did my damnedest to do whatever I needed to do to get sober. And I think that's what the difference was this time for me, was I went into it with the willingness to do whatever it took, as well as I was willing to lose whatever I had to lose, because at the time I didn't really have all that to lose, So what has happened in your recovery? You became Anchor, which is a huge deal. But what has happened in your recovery that has shown you the blessing of being recovered? What is something that someone that might be struggling should hope for in recovery?
Well, I think clearly. And I don't think that I knew what a clear mind was 2.5 years ago, because I lived so long with, an intoxicated brain. I drank every single day, most of the day. And so I think that having a clear mind and being able to navigate through life, like I said, everything isn't hunky-dory, everything's not perfect, but I have a solution in the 12-step program, and my friends in recovery. I know that I can turn to that, I can turn to them, I can tell people this is what I'm dealing with, and they can help me and talk me through, whatever I'm going through. So I believe having that just helped me start to look at life differently. Yeah. And then I started to see the changes, obviously, I was always nervous about being at work, gosh, what if someone saw me last night at the bar, and now I'm at work, oh, what's someone gonna think? Now that none of that happens, because I don't go to the bar, I don't drink, my mind is clear, I'm alert. And my supervisor told me about 4 months into recovery, and she had no idea what I was going through. She had no idea that I was in recovery. But she said to me, which was kind of the complete opposite of what my friends had said at the time before I went in. She goes, I don't know what it is about you. She was like, but you are on it. She was like, you come to work every day, you nail it. She was like, you're just on it. And in my mind, I'm like, that's when I was like, it's working.
Yeah.
It's working.
That's so good. And it actually says that in a lot of our literature, that the people around us will actually recognize the difference within us before we recognize it in ourselves, because we are gradually going with it. But that's a testament to that if she didn't even know what was going on in your life, but she mentioned something to you, that just goes to show what recovery really does for us. We have this new glow. We have this new found passion or whatever it is. But like you were saying also, it's not all rainbows and butterflies. But the great thing about it is that the solution is no longer self-harm, because that's really what addiction and alcoholism, what we're doing to ourselves, is self-harm. Yeah. It's self-harm. So Eddie, you actually have the blessing of helping others now as well, because I do want to get into that before we close. Because in my recovery, I have found some of the biggest, actually the biggest points of my recovery. I just felt like I was in the place where I was supposed to be. Everything was going right. Was when someone else got this thing through work with me, or when I spoke somewhere and people literally got something out of it. So tell me a little bit about what it's been like helping others with this.
Yeah, I've been able to talk to a lot of different people about my struggles and tell them my story. And before, I wouldn't have thought that someone would be like, oh, wow, that's something, but I know, based on what I do, people, kind of look at that and they're just like, wow, he was struggling too, let me hear his story. And it's been so great to be able to talk to people and to help people. I had a coworker come up to me who just said, I don't tell a lot of people about this because, you know, you're really good about talking about your stuff and like speaking out loud. And I don't do that, but I just want to tell you that I've also been sober for X amount of years. And I was like, wow. Because also, just like other people don't know what you're going through, I had no idea that she had been struggling with the same thing that I was struggling with. And we knew each other during the times of our struggles and still had no idea that we were both struggling. Wow. But we now both know that, you know, we're working this thing together.
Wow. And that's so amazing. And guys, that goes to show that sharing your story of recovery is going to help people that maybe they're struggling with addiction. Maybe they're the kids that we're going to be talking to that haven't started the path of drug addiction yet. Or maybe it's someone in recovery that is recovering in silence and they might be suffering too. So guys, again, Recovered on Purpose is all about getting your story out. I'm so excited to connect with you. Thank you for being here for this episode. Eddie, thank you so much for coming and joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. And guys, we'll see you next week. Love you so much. The black represents the darkness from which we came. The white represents the light in which we now live. And the red represents the passion it takes to live Recovered on Purpose.